Did you know pretty quickly after that? Because that's when it's like, all right, Kane's here. Kane's a superstar. After that, Kane, you're going to go on and be the champion for a night, which by the way, very similar to that Undertaker course. A year into the Undertaker's career, he beats Hogan and gets to be champion for a few days. Pretty quick into Kane's career, he beats Austin and gets to be champion for a day. But as you're watching, and it's like, okay, Kane exists without the Undertaker. Undertaker exists without Kane. Did you guys know the only place to take this is to eventually come back around and team us up?
Yeah, I mean, go ahead, Glenn.
I didn't actually, because I didn't know what was going to happen, and frankly, I was just thrilled to be there and thrilled to be in that position and thrilled to still be in the mix. And then though, it once you start like teasing the reunification of Undertaker and Kane, you realize, oh my gosh, this is actually the money, right? If we back up, and right before I guess it's the Royal Rumble where you had the casket match with Dawn, and I set the casket on fire.
Right.
And we teased there, Kane and the Undertaker coming together, State College, Pennsylvania. DX has got Undertaker down. They're putting the boots to him. I'll never forget, man, the crowd's chanting, "We want Kane." I have goosebumps. I was like, this is awesome. And, again, it was a great swerve, but then also I think, it showed me, and probably everybody else too, that's actually where the audience was invested, with seeing these two, seeing the brothers get together and seeing what they were going to do then, right? But and in the day-to-day course of things, again, I didn't have the creative mind to think at that time. Ultimately, the Brothers of Destruction, in my opinion, would really be where the business was. But man, you could feel it like every time we do something that looked like we were gonna end up on the same page, the crowd would just go nuts.
Yeah, and that obviously that was just due, I think, to the rivalry and the fact that, okay, we are brothers, and I think it first probably dawned on me, because it happens inevitably when your character, even as a heel character like Kane, it doesn't matter. Eventually, you become cool. You become cool to your audience, and that's where I think Glenn had got to that point, because he had done so much cool stuff, had all these epic battles with Undertaker, and now these other people. So the audience kind of starts turning to you anyway. And then, when I kind of started feeling that, then that's what I was like, ooh, it's like, did I think, would there be the runs? No, but I think like a couple of one-offs. Are you kidding me? That's huge. Yeah. And then once we finally did it, man, and it was like, oh yeah, people, it was nuts, because you got two bona fide killers, over the top supernatural gimmicks. Like, just start feeding us, right? I mean, who are you gonna, and I think that's ultimately the reason, they had to split us back up too, was this, there wasn't enough people for us to work with, because we were just too, we were just too dominant. I think that's my take on it.
Yeah,
I agree. I also think that going back to the family relationship and being brothers, I think that played into it too, because it's the old deal of, look, man, you can burn the house down with your brother in it, you can set him on fire, you can do all this stuff. You can do that, but if someone else messes with him, oh man, there's going to be hell. I think it was kind of that too, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. And there is that appeal that you're right. It only works for a short time, but there is this appeal of, like, we've seen Kane and the Undertaker, and they almost exist separately from everything else in WWE, because when they're together, if they're a team, they can destroy everybody. Like, there's nothing that can beat Kane and the Undertaker, and that's awesome until, you're right, you get to this place where it's like, all right, they beat everybody now.
Yeah.
Now what?
That's when you start evolving. I really think it's interesting that your two characters kind of evolved at a similar pace, where Undertaker, you start becoming the American badass, you evolve into the big evil character. Kane, your character, even before he takes the mask off, he starts to slowly but surely be humanized with the voice box, with I think with the partnership with X-Pac, just seeing that sort of sympathetic side to him. And then when you just start talking, and you still got the mask on, but you cut that classic promo with Hogan and The Rock when you're doing all the Hogan poses and everything, to the point where you eventually unmask. Were you aware at the time together that, like, this is still going to keep working with the two of us because we're evolving at the same pace? Or was it just, we're just existing in the world and this is what happens to characters?
I always thought the best version, I mean, even though when I was more of the traditional Undertaker and he was Kane, worked great. But for me, my favorite part was when I was the American Badass. And he was still pretty much Kane in the mask, because it just I don't know, it made it even more real to me, like, because you know how the world of WWE goes, like sometimes you'll have some kind of split variation and creative changes in a whole nother way. And although I was something completely different from when the two characters come together, we were still linked because we were brothers. And it was, I mentioned it in the doc. It's we did this pre-tape, and I don't even think we were doing anything together at the time. But there's a pre-tape that we did, and I think I was working with Lesnar the first when he came in the first time, and he had broke my arm or something. I don't remember the setup exactly, but like I'm sitting in this locker, and I don't know if I'd just gotten my ass kicked or whatnot, and then something has happened to Kane in the show, and he comes into the dressing room, right, and he sits down next to me, and this, I think it's the first time they'd seen us together in a while, and Kane, he just turns to me, and goes, "Well,
how was your week?"
It's just it's one of the funniest. I don't know. It was, maybe nobody else may see it that way. I just, when somebody, they gave me that, I was like, that is so funny and so good.
Yeah.
And it's worth going back and looking at, because I just thought it was really, really cool, and just one of them little nuggets of history there that I really stand out. I mean, obviously with all the matches and the angle, but that's one of the things that really made me smile when I look back and was doing that pre-tape.
I think it's just that the humanizing factor that you were talking about, and the fact that in the end, the guys are brothers, no matter what incarnation or whatever, they might be. And, yeah, you can actually see Undertaker and Kane doing that, just, for a moment, getting away from the fireballs and the lightning, like you said, with the American Badass, made it a little easier. And I think at that point too, my character had evolved somewhat. I was talking of course I was talking, so it wasn't quite the mystery that you had early on. And that's the thing about longevity in WWE, is you have to be able for your character to adapt and reinvent itself. And I think through all that, though, there's always a common thread with, because of the strong, story with Undertaker and Kane, there's always been that common thread that no matter, Kane wore a mask, didn't wear a mask, whatever, Undertaker was always around someplace. And especially I think it's stronger on my end, but same with Taker. It never surprised people if Undertaker or Kane were to pop up in the other storylines or whatever, right?
Yeah, and the fact too that I think, and Undertaker, you just said it really well, that when the American Badass was with Kane, it was that linking thing. It was one of the elements that showed you this is an evolution of a character, not a new character. This is still,
right.
Still brothers, and that's why I think that you're right, that when you see Kane, you think about the Undertaker and the Undertaker Kane, regardless of what form those characters are in, because both of those characters just evolve and evolve and evolve. I think it's poetic. I mean, I think you've told stories, Taker, about not necessarily wanting to go back to being the dead man, but the idea that 6 years later, first Kane buries you, which seemed unnecessary to me, but
I'm just saying.
Yeah.
They set me on fire once. I mean, he deserved it.
Yeah. I thought we buried the hatchet. Talk about carrying a grudge.
was there a level of comfort knowing that, first of all, this